I don't think anyone ever prepares you for the silence that comes after the last prayer at a funeral. People shuffle out, whispering condolences, chairs creak against the floor, and then suddenly it's just quiet, like the world is holding its breath, waiting to see what comes next. That's where I was the day we buried my dad. Sitting in the front row, the scent of lilies already clinging too heavy in my nose, the black suit collar itching at my neck. I hadn't even begun to process the fact that I'd never hear his laugh again, never get one of his bear hugs where he'd clap me so hard on the back I'd cough. And then my stepmother, Cynthia, leaned in with that sharp little smile she wore like armor. "You know you're not in the will, right?" she said, almost like she was telling me the weather. The words barely registered. My eyes were still fixed on the polished wood of Dad's casket, the way the sun streaming through the stained glass windows lit it up like fire. "What?" I asked, slow, because grief makes everything feel like you're underwater. "You heard me," she said, her voice low but triumphant, like she'd been rehearsing this moment. "Your father and I discussed everything. You should make your peace with it now, so you're not embarrassed later." Embarrassed. That was the word she chose. As if the day wasn't already a mountain of hurt, she wanted me to feel small on top of it. I swallowed hard, tasting bitterness. My dad had married Cynthia 5 years ago. She was younger, polished, always immaculately dressed in a way that screamed money, even though most of that money came from Dad. She never liked me, not really. She tolerated me in that clipped, polite way you do when you can't stand someone but have to pretend. Still, I didn't argue. Not then. Because grief does strange things, and part of me thought maybe she was right. Maybe Dad had left everything to her. Maybe he figured I was grown enough to make my own way. But then, as we all gathered in that cramped little back room of the funeral home for the reading of the will, everything shifted. The lawyer, Mr. Whitaker, was an older man with silver hair and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He had known Dad for decades. He greeted Cynthia with a stiff nod, then gave me a look that was both kind and unreadable. We sat at the long oak table, Cynthia perched like a queen, me slumped in my chair still fighting the heaviness in my chest. A couple of Dad's old fishing buddies had come to pay respects, but left quickly, leaving just the three of us. Whitaker cleared his throat, opened a folder, and began reading. It was straightforward at first. Some debts to settle, small gifts to old friends, a few donations to charities Dad supported. Cynthia's face softened into a smug little smirk, the kind you give when you're certain you've won. And then Whitaker paused. He looked directly at me. "There is also a letter addressed specifically to you," he said, pulling out an envelope sealed with Dad's handwriting across the front. My name. Bold, familiar strokes that made my throat tighten instantly. He slid it across the table. Cynthia's smirk faltered. "A letter?" she asked, her voice just a little too sharp. "Yes," Whitaker replied calmly. "Your father was quite clear that this be delivered only to his son, privately, if necessary." For the first time that day, I felt a spark of something other than grief, curiosity, maybe even hope. My hands shook as I picked up the envelope. It was heavier than I expected, like the weight of Dad's words pressed inside. Cynthia leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the table. "I assume," she said, her tone tight, "that whatever's in there doesn't change the terms of the estate." Whitaker's lips twitched in the faintest smile. "On the contrary, Mrs. Harlan." The letter explains his final intentions quite clearly. Her face drained of color. Just like that, the confident mask she'd worn all day slipped, and for the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. I didn't open the letter right away. My chest ached, and the room suddenly felt too small, too heavy with all the unsaid things. I could feel Cynthia's gaze drilling into me, equal parts panic and fury. Whitaker folded his hands. "Would you like a moment alone to read it?" I nodded, clutching the envelope to my chest like it was a lifeline. I stood, the chair scraping against the floor, and walked toward the window at the far end of the room. The glass was cool beneath my fingertips, the view of the cemetery stretching out beyond. For a second, I just stood there, staring at the envelope, hearing Dad's voice in my memory. He had this way of saying my name, steady and grounding. And suddenly, I knew whatever was inside was meant to be more than just instructions. It was his last conversation with me. When I finally slid my thumb under the flap and pulled the letter free, my stepmother gasped. The sound wasn't grief, it was dread. And in that moment, I realized something. Dad hadn't just left her nothing. He'd left her a message. And by the look on her face, she already knew it wasn't one she wanted to hear. I unfolded the letter like I was opening a door I'd been knocking on for years. Dad's handwriting wasn't neat, never was, but it had a rhythm I knew by heart. The first line hit me before I even finished it. "Kiddo," he wrote, "if you're reading this, it means I couldn't stall the inevitable with a bad joke or another fishing trip." My throat tightened. He always called me kiddo when he wanted me to listen, not talk. "I need you to hear me without interruption, because I wasn't brave enough to say all of this out loud. Grief is loud. This letter needs quiet." Behind me, Cynthia's nail tapped the table, a tiny metronome of impatience. "Mr. Whitaker coughed softly, like a reminder that I could keep reading or stop and hand the moment back to her. I kept reading. "I'm married for companionship," Dad wrote. "I'm not ashamed of wanting that at my age. But I am ashamed that I let the comfort of it separate us. That distance is on me, not you." The words blurred. I blinked them clear. "You were always going to be okay without my money. You're stubborn, and you work hard, and somewhere along the way you figured out how to be gentler than I taught you to be. I am proud of that. Still, I know what you think of Cynthia and her taste, and you're not wrong to worry. So I made a plan." There was a crease in the paper where he'd pressed hard, the ink a little darker. "The house is in a revocable trust one set up years ago." I did not add Cynthia. She knew that. "Mr. Whitaker will explain the details, but the short version is, it goes to you, along with the lake lot, my truck, and the shop. If you don't want any of it, sell it. If you keep it, fix the loose porch step I kept promising to fix." I heard Cynthia inhale like she'd been punched. "That can't be right," she said, voice tight. "We discussed." Whitaker raised a palm without looking at her. "Mrs. Harlan, you'll have time to review the documents. Please let him finish." My heart thudded. I kept reading, fingers trembling. I left small bequests to people who showed up when it wasn't easy. Pastor Jim, the VFW hall, Mrs. Ruiz next door. Tell her I said thank you for the casseroles and the lectures. She will try to refuse. Don't let her. A half smile tugged at my mouth. Mrs. Ruiz gave out food and opinions in equal measure. "And Cynthia," the next line began, and the room seemed to tilt. "I did not leave you money. Not because I am cruel. Because we signed a prenuptial agreement with a very clear clause. If you remain married to me at the end of my life, you would receive a transition stipend and 1 year of paid housing, on the condition that you do not contest this estate and that you leave my son alone. You were present when we signed. You kept the pen." Cynthia's chair scraped the floor. "What stipend?" she snapped. "He never." Whitaker slid a second envelope across the table without meeting her eyes. "Your letter." Her hand hovered, then snatched it like it might run away. She tore it open. Whatever Dad had written to her, it drained the color from her face in an instant. I went back to my letter. "If she cooperates," Dad wrote, "Whitaker will cut checks monthly for that year and arrange for a rental in her name. If she makes trouble for you or tries to rewrite the past, the no contest clause voids that support. I don't want to fight from the grave, but I won't have you bullied in my name." I felt heat in my chest that wasn't anger exactly. It was something like relief, braided with shame that I'd doubted him. "There are a few things only you and I understand," he continued. "In my tackle box under the false bottom, there's a velvet pouch. It isn't jewelry. It's 3 coins your granddad carried to every job interview because he believed luck rides shotgun with preparation. I carried them to the hospital the day you were born. I want you to carry them when life feels like ice under your boots." There was a small, taped bump near the bottom of the page. I turned the letter over. A key fell into my palm, old and cold. "That key is for the safe deposit box at Pioneer Bank." The next paragraph read, "Tell Whitaker the phrase, bluegill at dawn, and he'll go with you." Inside is my real apology. All the words I didn't say when I should have. Also, paperwork that proves what I suspected and then confirmed. My eyes flicked up. Cynthia was reading her letter with both hands, lips moving. Then she hissed, "How dare he?" Not to us, but to the room. "Confirmed what?" I whispered. Whitaker's chin tipped toward the page. "Keep reading. I'm not writing this to hurt anyone," Dad wrote. "But I need you to know I found the accounts she opened in my name. I closed them. I left the evidence. I didn't confront her because I wanted peace in the time I had left, but peace is not the same as pretending. If she tries to paint you as greedy, show her the truth and walk away." The paper shook. I could picture him at the kitchen table, chewing the end of the pen, putting this down because once it was ink, it was real. Finally, he wrote, do one last thing for me. Take my watch to the shop and have them polish it. Wear it if you like, or give it to someone you love who shows up when it's hard. Time is what we borrow. Love is what we get to keep. I kept yours longer than I deserved. Dad. I let the letter drop against my thigh. The room was too quiet again. Cynthia slammed her envelope on the table. This is manipulation, she said, voice shaking. He's trying to control me from the grave. Whitaker laced his fingers. What your letter states, Mrs. Harlan, is simple. You have 12 months of support and moving assistance if you sign the agreement not to contest and not to harass his son. If you contest, you forfeit the support. The trust owns the house. You were never added to title. You can remain for 30 days to make arrangements. His tone was gentle but immovable, like a door that would not open no matter how hard you pushed. She stared at him, then at me, eyes sharp as needles. You knew, she spat. I shook my head. I'm finding out right now. Her laugh was short and ugly. You think this makes you the hero? He didn't tell you because he knew you'd gloat. There was nothing in me that felt like gloating. Just a deep, aching gratitude that Dad had been braver on paper than he'd been in person. Whitaker stood. I'll set an appointment at Pioneer Bank for Monday morning, he said. I advise you both to take the weekend to breathe. Cynthia pushed back her chair so hard it tipped, caught it, then squared her shoulders like she was walking onto a stage. I will not be humiliated, she said, but her voice thinned at the end. She gathered her purse, crumpled the letter in her fist, and swept out. The door clicked shut. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Whitaker adjusted his glasses and offered a small, tired smile. He loved you, you know. I nodded, clutching the key. I know now. Bluegill at dawn? He asked. Bluegill at dawn, I said, and felt something steady build in my chest, as if my dad had just pressed a hand between my shoulder blades from a place I couldn't see. Outside, the lilies still hung in the air like a too sweet reminder. Inside my pocket, the key felt heavy. Monday was coming, and with it, answers I wasn't sure I was ready to hold. The following Monday, I met Mr. Whitaker at Pioneer Bank. The morning light filtered in through the glass walls, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and paper. My stomach twisted as we approached the safe deposit vault. Bluegill at dawn, I said softly, handing over my ID. The clerk nodded without hesitation, almost like she'd been told to expect it. Moments later, a small metal box was placed in front of me. Whitaker stepped back, giving me space, his presence steady but unobtrusive. I slid the key into the lock. My hand shook, and for a second I just stared at it, thinking of Dad's rough hands holding the same key, probably debating when I'd be ready for this moment. Then I turned it, and the latch clicked open. Inside was a thick folder, a velvet pouch, and a smaller sealed envelope with my name again, this time written slower, shakier. I opened the pouch first. 3 coins clinked into my palm, worn smooth by time. My throat tightened. Granddad's coins. Dad's talisman. Now mine. Then the folder. Bank statements, credit reports, notarized letters. I skimmed through them, my pulse rising. Each document outlined accounts Cynthia had quietly opened, shifting funds, creating debts in Dad's name. He'd closed them all, but the paper trail was damning. Whitaker's jaw tightened as he glanced through. He was meticulous, he said quietly. This would stand in any court. Finally, I tore open the last envelope. Kiddo, it began. If you've come this far, it means you're stronger than I ever was about facing the hard truths. I need you to know, I didn't ignore what she did. I chose to leave it alone while I lived because I wanted my days to end in peace, not in arguments. But I couldn't let her rewrite the story once I was gone. My eyes blurred again, but I kept going. You're probably angry I didn't tell you. Maybe you think I left you holding the bag. But this was my way of making sure the truth was undeniable. You don't have to fight her with your fists or your voice. You've got proof. Use it only if you must. And remember, people who spend their life chasing money never stop running. Let her run. I pressed the paper to my chest. It felt like he was still guiding me, even now. When I left the bank, Cynthia was waiting outside in the parking lot. Her car idled by the curb, her face pale and tight. As soon as I stepped out, she rolled down the window. So he left you everything, she said, no pretense left in her tone. Just cold bitterness. I didn't answer. You think you won? She snapped. All you've got is a house falling apart and some rusty tools. He owed me. After everything I gave up, after everything I endured, he owed me. I met her eyes. For once, I didn't feel small under her gaze. He left you something, I said evenly. A year of support. On the condition you leave me alone. Take it, or walk away with nothing. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles went white. For a moment, I thought she might lunge out of the car and start screaming right there in the bank parking lot. But instead, she hissed through clenched teeth, "You'll regret this." Then she sped off. Whitaker walked up beside me, calm as ever. "She can bluster all she wants," he said. "The documents are airtight. Your father was very deliberate." That night, I sat on the porch of Dad's house. The boards creaked under my weight, and sure enough, the step he'd always promised to fix wobbled beneath my foot. I laughed softly, wiping my eyes. Inside, his old watch sat on the table, waiting to be polished. The coins were in my pocket. His letter rested on the counter where I could read it again whenever the silence got too heavy. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something other than grief. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was peace. The kind Dad must have wanted me to carry forward. Cynthia could chase whatever ghosts she thought she was owed. I had what mattered: my father's truth, his love written out in ink, and a chance to keep living without the weight of her shadow. And somehow, that felt like the greatest inheritance of all.